Hello, everybody, and happy Thursday to you, and welcome to the Witty Writers Show. I've been so excited for weeks because we have the amazing top literary agent, Mark Gottlieb from Trident Media with us today. Hello, Mark.
Hey, good to be back. How are you doing? How's everyone doing?
Fantastic. And Mark, I've got to tell you, we've had so much amazing feedback from every single show we've done together. But because we get so many questions, and unfortunately, I don't know whether you've noticed this, so we tend to get a lot of questions right towards the end. So we can't always get to them, unfortunately.
Everyone decides they're like not shy anymore toward that point, and then it's too late. It's over. Wish we could just do the questions first.
Well, and that's what we're going to do today. I'm super excited. We are live here on Facebook and we're live on YouTube. So if you've got any questions, please put them in the comments so we can see them. I'm still not sure whether questions from from YouTube Live actually pop up here. I'm not sure. But to be on the safe side, my peeps, if you want your question answered, put them on both. Just be on the safe side. Do it in the YouTube Live and the Facebook Live. So we will definitely see them then. We've already got lots of people popping up and saying hello. So thank you for that. And if you do have any burning questions you want to know, please put them in the questions in the comments, because then Mark and I can answer them for you. And don't be shy. Don't be shy. Just put them up, because you can guarantee that if you're thinking it, lots of other people are thinking the same thing or wanting to know the same thing. So don't be embarrassed. There is no silly questions. Every question is important if it's important to you. All right. Excuse me.
Oh, hope you're okay.
I choked on my own spit. How did that happen? It's because I'm talking too quick. I'm getting all
a lot of people are back. They're saying hello.
They are. They are. Let's pop them on and say hello.
Vikram already has a question too, I see. But yeah.
They do. They do. Okay, we got James who's joined us. He says, hello, Beth and Mark. Hello, James. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments. We've also got Heather. She says, hi to you both from Gemma and I. Hello, hello, hello. We've also got Stephanie Nietzsche. She says, hello, Beth and Mark. She's also in New York as well. We've also got Adam. He says, I'm here. Welcome, Adam. He's a new viewer and participant. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And we've also got Vikram. And he says, hey, Mark, thank you so much for your time. After submitting a query letter, is there anything a writer can do to bolster his or her chances of a second book? That's a very good first question.
I would say just initially making sure the query letter is as appealing as possible. And if someone requested the letter, I think it's reasonable then to follow up with them, every couple of weeks or so. But yeah, getting the letter in as great a shape as possible is the best chance.
Now, I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that, because I do get asked it a lot. If an author gets picked up by a literary agent and a publisher, and they do continue to write more books, how important is it for authors, when they're then querying their second or third book or fourth book, to include information about their previous books, how well it's done, what sort of ratings they've had? Should they include that sort of information in their next query letter?
Well, at that point, the author is, probably under contract with the publisher, if they're now with an agent and a publisher, and the publisher has what's called an option on the author's next book. And typically, if it's fiction, the option is on the next book-length work of fiction, either in the series or could just be open-ended, could be the author's next book-length fiction. If it's nonfiction, it's usually on the same or similar subject matter, or they might ask, just author's next book-length work of nonfiction. So naturally, the thing you would do is go back to the publisher who published your first book, offer them the opportunity of Basically, it amounts to it's as worthless as like of giving them an opportunity for a first look, or it's almost like a professional courtesy. But they have time to sit on it, to consider, and decide whether or not to make an offer. And if they make an offer, then the author can decide whether they want to stay with the publisher or not. And if they pass on the publisher's offer, they can go out into the marketplace and explore other opportunities. And at that point, yes, they should then mention their previously published work, especially they should mention if the book did really well. Um, in instances like that, we try to say to the publisher that, they're, if the author wants to go out into the world and explore other opportunities, we say to the publisher, you're welcome to keep your offer on the table if you like, but we'd like to explore other opportunities. And sometimes, in light of that, the publisher will increase their offer. And other times they just, wait and see if the author will come around to working with them.
Fantastic. And what about from a self-published author's point of view? Because obviously we do have a lot of our participants and viewers who are self-published. If they've self-published a book or books, and they want to then query for their newest novel, should they include their facts and figures of how well their previous work has done?
So if an author has previously published work, self-published work, definitely if the sales numbers are strong, they should really mention that. Strong in the eyes of publishers probably would be at least 10 or 15,000 copies sold per book. Ideally, especially if it was at a low price, a lot of ebooks are priced very low, like 50,000 copies. If we're talking like a 99-cent or $2 or $3 ebook, to include those figures, because the publisher will inevitably ask if those numbers aren't there. If that's not the case, then it's a matter of the author probably either not mentioning that previously self-published work, or a lot of authors they want to try a pen name or other things. And sometimes it's hard to do because with the internet, people eventually put two and two together. Everyone figured out Nora Roberts was, she has a thriller writer named J.D. Robe, but I think she made that, readily known in like her author bios. So yeah, it can be.
J.K. Rowling, sorry, J.K. Rowling did a similar thing as well, didn't she?
Right, when she wanted to start writing adult books.
Yeah, I think something McGrath.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. And she kept it quiet for a while, and then she sort of said, yeah, okay, that is me. I think somebody guessed it, and she's like, yeah, okay, it's me.
Oh my gosh, my fiance and I, we watched the new Harry Potter documentary on HBO, and then it's like she went down this Harry Potter hole of like she had to rewatch every movie. There's 8 of them, and then she wanted to reread every book. And then we went to the Harry Potter store in New York City, and it was like watching a kid in the candy store. I would turn around to see where she was, and she had just gone to another part of the store. It happened 3 times at least.
I can't say nothing because me and my daughters are Harry Potter mad. Because I read them the Harry Potter series when they all started coming out and everything, and then I became as addicted as the kids.
It was the most amazing thing because I always remember as a kid growing up, the parents reading to you, and it was to help the kids to bed, and then the parents would fall asleep after them or tuck them in. With Harry Potter, it was like the kids just wanted to keep the story going, and the parents were the ones that were getting tired.
I would say to my kids, just one more chapter. Oh my gosh. Well, we've got some more questions, so thank you for answering that. That is super, super brilliant. We've got Travis. Travis says, hi, Mark. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this. I'm currently seeking representation for my first book, and I want to ask for writers submitting a debut novel who might have had a lot of direct connections to agents. Do you have any tips for establishing a personal connection in the query letter outside of researching the agent's tastes via their bio, publishers marketplace, and interviews, etc.? That is
Oh,
a very good question.
this is great. We're doing this because we get to everyone's burning questions, and
I
they're
know.
very well thought out. Um, I think with regard to that, a lot of authors feel like, and it's a human thing, a personal connection with someone. We're social creatures, us human beings. But I think, in my line of work, like the work will always speak for itself. If the meat and potatoes of the story sounds interesting and it's well written, then it's enough to win the day. You really don't need anything else more than that. A lot of writers, I think, because they hear uh, a lot of agents who are really kind of high on themselves talk, they think, oh my gosh, this person has a massive ego. Well, I need to stroke their ego to get into their good graces. And in fact, I think that adds to the problem for most agents and, you know, takes away from what's most important, which is the writing, the quality of the work, the storytelling. So when I get a query letter that says, oh, I'm submitting this to you because I admire your work, or, I'm such a fan of your clients or whatever, to me, it's very kind, but it's just noise. And I skip that and I go right to the part where they're telling me who they are as writers and what their story is about, because that's all that matters to me. Um, I don't want to read that stuff because I don't I don't want to have a really inflated ego. I'm trying to make my ego much smaller. So, um, and frankly, I don't know if a writer really they should ask themselves if they want to work with an agent who needs to hear that
Yeah.
from people.
And we've touched on this before, haven't we? At the end of the day, there are many different areas that are our first impression as an author. So, a query letter is a first impression of us and the first impression of our books. So it's super important to have, I feel, a really good hook to grab the agent's attention.
Oh, that's all it takes, really. I mean, you
Yeah.
don't need all the kinds of s- fireworks or fire show on stage, just needs to be good work and
Yeah.
sound enticing in and of itself. Um, it obviously helps if you have a referral sometimes, like, you know, if it's walked in by another client, that's another matter. If that's what the author meant by establishing a personal connection. But otherwise, good writing will always win the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've got to sell your story. That's the thing, isn't it? You've got to sell it. I always say to my clients that I work with, eh, imagine your book description and your hook as a movie trailer, because these big production companies spend thousands, well, millions and millions and millions researching what will hook somebody to watch their movie. and
Mhm.
and these movie trailers are meant to literally sell that story. So I always say to my clients, look at movies that are similar in genre to your book and see how that was marketed, because you get the dramatic feel, you get the anticipation, and that's what you want to try and, I feel, put in a query letter to intrigue the agent like you enough to think, oh, this sounds good. Oh, I really would like to read the first 3 chapters of this.
That's all the magic in the sauce. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Right, let's pick another question. I'm trying to keep up with them and make sure I get the right ones
Oh,
here.
yeah. A lot of questions are coming in.
Okay, I've okay, right. Okay, I've done that one. Right,
Vikram, I think.
Vikram.
Yeah.
I think Vikram's next. He's got a question. He says, "Have you ever passed on a query letter about a book that went on to become successful? What about that query letter that made you second guess pursuing it?" That's
Uh,
a good one, because I bet every agent who's been in the job a number of years has been in this situation.
that only happened once. I was very conflicted over the book. Um, there's this book by a comic book artist. He goes by the name of the Awkward Yeti. He was really popular in the webtoon scene, especially early on as like webtoons and tapas was getting itself established in the webtoon space. So I saw he had a really big audience, and he reached out to me. I guess he had seen some of the work I was doing in the graphic novel space, and he wanted to do a book called, I think it was called like The Head and the Heart. And basically, it's a graphic novel book for kind of mixes health and humor and goes into how sometimes the heart feels one way, but the mind feels another, and vice versa, and the kind of tete-a-tete that they have. So you actually see this cute little heart, looks like a little organ with arms and legs and eyes, and same thing with the brain. And the art style was very like kind of rudimentary, like befitting of webtoon style. I didn't really know very many publishers that were in that space, and frankly, I mean, the art style, it appealed to me, but I didn't. Publishers hadn't really woken up to graphic novels, especially in the adult space. They haven't in a really big or meaningful way. So I didn't really see very many places where the book could live. Anyway, long story short, Andrews McMeel picked up the book. They published it. It became a New York Times bestseller, in the comic book section, anyway, of the New York Times list for whatever that's worth. And you know, I think his books have probably been successful since then. And, he's a big name. I still kind of beat myself up for not having, taken it on. I was very conflicted about what to do, but
Yeah.
I definitely would have sold it to Andrews McMeel because the art really fit their style.
It's crazy, isn't it? How sometimes an author or a book will just all of a sudden just sneak onto the market and just blow it up because you can't always predict it, can you?
You can't. It's like going to the casino or anything like that. It's that's the fortuitousness of it, and it's part of what makes like the work so exciting and magical because like
Yeah.
you never know what could happen.
Yeah, and one book can literally change the whole market. I mean, you think about there were books that my children used to read, like The Worst Witch, which was popular, when they were young, but it wasn't big. It wasn't a big thing.
Mm.
So there was a market for, witches and wizards and stuff like that. But then when J.K. Rowling came out with Harry Potter, it just blew up. And it literally changed the whole
Oh,
market in the
it's that
first season.
tide that just lifts all the boats. It was the same thing with 50 Shades of Grey or
Yeah,
Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code. When books like that came out, it just made the industry so successful as a whole because people were reading voraciously, buying books, and then publishers were trying to publish into similar spaces. Every time that happens, it's so good for the industry as a whole. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you just can't predict it. If only we had a magic ball. Okay, we've got Heather's next with her questions. She says, "Hello again." Hello, Heather. Thank you for joining us again. Is it best to query one agent and publisher at a time with the chance the work is requested, or is that too slow a process? I've been asked this a lot because
Mhm.
there are some agents that want to know if they're the only person that's being queried, and yet there are other agents that I know of who are quite happy that authors are actually, applying to multitude of agents and, weighing up their options. So what do you think about that?
I have a couple of colleagues who have, it's called asking for an exclusive, and basically the agent wants to sit on would otherwise sit on a manuscript, but if they usually say in exchange for having an exclusive, they'll read it as quickly as they can and get back to them. But it doesn't necessarily guarantee that, right? I've never seen the sense in asking for an exclusive of an author. I always assume people are just querying widely. And I feel like if I ask or insist on an exclusive, it kind of like precludes me from working with a lot of people. So
Mm,
I would just people much rather feel they want to work with me than have to work with me. Um, but what I always try and do is read as quickly as I can, express my level of interest that way, and getting back to people soon, and then hopefully they want to work together. I think if you go that way, kind of working your way down a list one agent at a time and giving an exclusive like that, it can take a long time, and you have much better chances if they're like different people vying for your attention. It would be like if you're using a dating app and they only showed you one person at a time a week or a month. And they were like, all right, you have to sit on this and think about it. You'd think, no, I want to keep swiping, to the left. And so, yeah, I think authors will be better off if they have a lot of variety and a lot of people like vying for their attention.
Yeah. See, I always, my business brain is always there, and I always think to myself, at the end of the day, all writers and authors are basically self-employed. You're running your own business. You're in charge of your own business and your own future. So, as a business person, as well as an author, your best bet is business practice is to give yourself the best options available and try and find the right fit, isn't it?
Yes,
It's like looking for a business
diversify your portfolio, like every aspect of business and life. It's the same with that. It's no different than applying for schools. A lot of my friends wanted to apply for their dream school, early action, and a lot of them were really smart. I mean, they could have gotten into multiple Ivy League schools, and yet they kind of like precluded themselves from exploring their other options. And on the one hand, I was happy for them if they knew what they wanted and they had their mind made up. On the other hand, it's nice to have options in life. With that being said, I think maybe authors want to start with like a top list of agents they want to work with and kind
Yeah,
of work their way down the list. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And do your research, people. Do your research. If you want to, just quickly, if you guys want to find legitimate and well-respected literary agents and publishing companies, then do go to Publishers Marketplace and Query Tracker. Those are the two best places that I've discovered that you can find legitimate people in the business, because there are so many small publishing companies and very small time agents who haven't got very good reputations. So be careful and do your research. Before we go to the next question on here, I'm going to give you a question that was left over from our last show. It says, is a query letter okay to be half a page? Hook, word count, a genre, 5 lines of what the book's about, and 2 lines about the writer. Is that enough?
oh, well, first of all, thank you. It's very kind of you to have kept track of the questions from the last show.
I'm efficient.
Um, Everyone appreciates it, I'm sure. But with the query letter, I think no more than a page, and even if it's only half a page, that's fine. But again, what I think goes into a good query letter is the hook up front, a couple of body paragraphs describing the book's plot details, without too many major spoilers, and then a 1 paragraph author bio of relevant writing experience, writing credentials. Pretty simple and straightforward. And yeah, I mean, with the hook, you can include a couple comp titles, but that keeps it nice and simple. Yeah.
I would imagine for you, if there's too much other information in a query letter, it sort of would take away from the hook and the selling points of the story.
Yeah, because you have to, again, think of this experience of agents getting hundreds of queries a day. They receive a really long letter. They're just trying to find, you know, where that hook is hidden in the query letter and start with that and to go from there. So these kind of long query letters that include like an entire synopsis of the book or the first chapter, I see sometimes inserted in a query letter. It really works against authors. It's not in their favor to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're going to go with our next question, which is from Angela. Hello, Angela. She says, hello, Beth and Mark from the Sea Coast. I'm rewriting my debut draft for the 6th time. I feel your pain, Angela. And decided to write in dual timelines and make it a historical piece. Does historical fiction need a subgenre like mystery or suspense as well?
Well, that is hard to say because historical fiction is so wide-reaching in terms of what it does. I mean, look at that Outlander book series. That's like so far afield from what you would think of it in terms of like traditional, just straight historical fiction. Um, Kudos to you on, you know, repolishing the book so many times. I think sometimes it can present a challenge writing dual timelines or even dual points of view. Um, but I think it's interesting to see historical fiction that plays how it plays in the present day and in the past, kind of like the Indiana Jones movies always drew upon this adventurer from the present day, but also he was exploring ancient history and its implications for the present day. Like, why did these Nazis want to steal this ancient treasure that was so powerful, or whatever? And it's the same thing with those National Treasure movies, or any of those. So I think it's interesting when historical fiction works in a present day timeline and in historical timeline. Um, it's harder, I think, when you work in if you let's say you had a book that was working in World War I and World War II, those two timelines, that could be a little harder. But in terms of genre for historical fiction, I usually just kind of file it under kind of general fiction, you know, or if it's written for women, it might fit under women's historical fiction, or just debut fiction.
There are so many categories, aren't there, to choose from? And just for our new authors that have joined us, I know that when people have their books in Amazon, especially if you're self-published and you're new to the publishing world, you can pick two different categories for your book to go in. However, your categories you can actually ask Amazon to have 10. You can actually have your book in 10 different categories. So that's super important for authors to know. So it's a balance, isn't it, between having your book in the most popular genres, but also having them in more defined genres to catch key readers who are interested in a specific type of story. I must admit, one tool that's been invaluable to me in my book marketing and etc. Has been Publisher Rocket, which isn't free. You do have to pay for it, but it does allow me to find the right categories for my books and give you a broader scope, more opportunity to reach more readers as well. So it might be worth having a look at Publisher Rocket to see what categories would be applicable to your story and go from there. You can also have a look and type in other authors with similar books to see what categories they're in, to give you a better idea. And you've mentioned that before, haven't you, Mark? It is important to have a look at similar books to see what they are doing, what categories they're in, how well they're doing, how they're being marketed. Because even looking at how they're being marketed can help you develop your own great hook and sell your story, because you're getting the right vibe from books that have been successful. So there we go. It's all trial and error. It's all trial and error. I'm going to quickly do another question from our previous show. It says, what writers' conferences are the most professionally revered and productive in quality? Now, this is a good question for you because you and Robert go on quite a lot. You're very hands-on, aren't you, with the conferences and festivals and stuff?
Oh, I've been to a lot of conferences. I mean, there was a point where I was going to one or two a month, and I had to slow myself down. But I'd say, having been to just about every corner of this country and almost every state and seeing all the conferences, Writer's Digest has a conference in New York, which is really good because you're basically in the heart of New York City, where publishing is based. So none of these people have to travel to get to you. Um, and the other one that's really good is the San Francisco Writers Conference is really just, they make it a very nice, fancy top flight event, which attracts a lot of people. They host it in like a 4-star hotel and things like that. And so, of course, people want to go and experience that. So it's a big draw for a lot of good people in the industry, and it's a pretty high level of quality that they have there. You know, in terms of somewhere kind of in the middle of the country, in Texas, the Writers League of Texas is a really great event, and they're tied in with the university, I think, at Austin there, which has a great writing program, and they're involved with the James Michener Center and all that. And it's run very, very well. Becca Oliver, who runs it, she, you know, had worked in publishing for a time, and so she has a good insider's view of all this. And I discovered a client there, and you know, sold him in a 6-figure deal for a debut. So there's good work coming out of that space. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much each side of the country in the middle. Of course, there are lots of other good events, you know, that come pretty close. In terms of workshops, Iowa is usually the big one. You know, there's Breadloaf, Sewanee, you know, some other really fine workshops. But I think those are the good professional conferences, like for covering every kind of fiction and nonfiction.
Fantastic. And I know Writers Digest, they do have a fantastic website. They've got a whole community as well. I mean, it's fantastic. They're always doing competitions and events and everything else. So I actually subscribe to their newsletter. So I get emails about what they're doing, what competitions they got coming up, what conferences they got coming up. So it's all about getting the right information. And now with email and notifications, you can, you know, go on people's websites and these event websites and sign up for future information, which is invaluable. And I also think it's quite important, if people can do it, to go to relevant conferences for your genre as well, because you will, you know, any information you receive from going to any type of conference, especially if it's, you know, for historical fiction or science fiction or whatever, you're going to meet new people, gain lots of new information, possibly make great connections with people who also do events, etc. And it's a great way of getting known as well, I think. So let's hope with the once everybody's had COVID, because I think everybody's going to get it eventually, hopefully we might get to some, you know, back to some sort of normality, and people can start actually going to all these events and everything again, which would be fantastic. Okay, we got another question come up from Adam. Adam, you're next. Adam says, Mark, you once said that you can see from the first sentence in a query letter, will give it a chance, or you will pass that query. So I will use this chance to inspect my first sentence in my query letter with you for my non-fiction novel in a series that starts with Catholic Church is hiding that the third secret Fatima and Marian apparitions in general reveal that humanity, by losing faith in God, will lose protection of friendly aliens, that solar system will be faced with an invasion. That is a big mouthful and a big sentence.
Well, I mean, so just to answer the first part of the question, um, you know, there's sort of a caveat with this, you know, saying that the first sentence in the query letter will give me a sense of whether I'll pass on it or not. Depends on what the first sentence is, right?
Yeah, it's that hook, isn't it? It's does
Right.
it?
If that's up front, then I will can know better. If I have to dig through the letter, you know, it's a different matter. But I think a well-written hook up front in the query letter, yeah, can make or break a book. I think what will help the hook here, you know, the quick pitch, the hook that Adam shared, is just shortening it a little bit.
Yeah.
Like you said, there is a good way to make it punchier and just to save some of these details for the rest of the letter.
Yeah.
Just something like the Catholic Church is hiding, the secret that, maybe apparitions reveal that, uh, humanity losing faith in God will
It
result.
could actually be a fantastic hook. As I said before, I always tell my clients to look at movie trailers because they always do fantastic hooks, which are short, sharp, and sweet. So I agree. I mean, Catholic Church is hiding the third secret. Losing faith in God will lose protection of friendly aliens. It's short, sharp sentences because to me, a hook shouldn't be really more than 3 sentences long and it should be dramatic and really catching.
Hmm,
So it's picking out those key elements and using those as your sales pitch, basically, isn't it?
hmm,
But I do like that, Adam. It does sound intriguing, I have to say. But I'm always shortening my clients' blurbs and hooks. And they'll send me, bless them, they'll send me like massive long ones. And I will literally just pick out key elements and go, okay, 5 sentences long, or if it's a book blurb, short, sharp. If it's a hook, 2 to 3. And
hmm,
it's just dramatic. It is
hmm.
always dramatic. Let's have a look. Next question. We got Patty. Patty's next. She says, "Hi, it's nice to see you. You represent my friend, Bruce Warden. Lucky man. I have had 4 traditionally published history books, but I'm now writing kids' books with neurodiverse characters. Should I mention the history books in queries? Thank you very much." Good
Hmm.
question, Patty.
Yeah, good to meet you. Same name as the punk rocker, Patti Smith.
That's right.
um, so yeah, and Bruce is a client. He's been fun to work with. We have a book we did together. I actually have a copy over there. It's called. It's a book of homophones that Chronicle Books published, and so basically they're words that sound the same or similar, very similar, but they're spelled in different ways and they mean different things. Or sometimes they're spelled the same way, but they mean different things. So the word, you know, right and right, like to the direction right, or correct, things like that. So it was a fun book. Um, I think it can't hurt to mention the traditionally published books and the publishers who publish them. Obviously, since it sounds like it's going to be now fiction books for kids. Publishers will take a different view of it. It's going to be apples and oranges. So
Yeah.
even in the reverse, if you were a fiction author and you're trying your hand at nonfiction, they're not really going to hold it against you one way or the other. You know, whether the sales were good or bad, or that they were with a big publishers or not. I mean, obviously, it could help a little bit, but they're to the publishers, they're apples and oranges, right?
Yeah.
They're very different things. So that's why I think it can't hurt to mention.
Yeah. Good answer. Okay, let's have a look. I'm going to pick another question from our previous show. If a query letter doesn't contain comparative titles, is that a deal breaker?
Not necessarily. I mean, eventually we'll want to put them together, but it makes the agent's work probably a lot easier, because eventually they want to put that kind of information together for a publisher. And I think it's good for writers to know that about their work too, to have that information readily available at least. It's all in service of the writer. It's going to benefit them ultimately. So I think it's worth doing if you can. But if you don't, it's not the end of the world.
I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. Have you ever been in the situation where you've had a query letter, they've given you comparative titles, but then you've read the sample chapters and you thought, that is nothing like what they compared it
Oh,
to?
all the time. All the time, which is why, you need to make a good comparison. There was one time where there was like 6 different comparative titles, and they were all over the place. And some of them were like movies, some of them were TV shows, some of them were books, some of them were really old, like written, 50 years ago or something. And I was like, I didn't even know where to begin. So
from your point of view, if a new author can't put their finger on good comparative titles, is it better
they're better off than not
just
doing
not
it.
doing it?
Or if they can, sometimes it's hard to understand, it's hard to just look in the mirror and know that, like, about one's work. It's just sometimes appealing to friends or other, writers or people who've read your work to kind of get their opinion can help. But the main goal is to just hold yourself in high esteem. You want to compare to books that were recent bestsellers, published within the last 5 years, of the reading age and genre. That's it.
And show that there's a market. That's the thing, isn't it? If you're picking good comparisons to your books, comparisons that have been successful and that have sold well, then you're instantly giving the impression there is a market for my work, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we've got another question from Adam. He says, similar question. Imagine that you are in your office reading queries concerning the present geopolitical situation in the world. Would you take in consideration a query that starts with Marian apparitions reveal that Russia will suddenly attack on a global scale and conquer the great part of the free world? Additional question is, what is the spirit of big publishers in messing with titles that deal with present geopolitical hot potatoes? Are they afraid to provoke anybody in the world?
Well, maybe I'll just start with the second part of this question, which is the additional question. So the spirit of big publishers messing with titles that deal with present geopolitical hot potatoes. Are they afraid to prove anybody in the world? Okay. Yeah, there are books that tie into world issues. There was a book I sold to Scribner recently in a six-figure deal. It was made deal of the day on Publishers Marketplace. The deal announcement ran in PW, and it's about these two black transient punks coming of age amidst the Black Lives Matter movement. They're in San Francisco, but there's a murder at the hands of the police, and deeply upsets them, kind of just rocks their world. And so obviously that's a book that ties into, what's going on in the world now. In other cases, sometimes publishers just don't want to touch political issues. Sometimes depends on the type of publisher. But I think books that are timely and speak to issues can be interesting. With that being said, most publishers are pretty left-leaning. They're very democratically minded. And so, if there's a book, a fiction book praising, the alcohol, tobacco, firearms lobby or something like that, it's not going to excite a publisher in the same way as, a social issue that the left is more concerned with. Now, that's just a general kind of thing. There are publishers, like we call them conservative publishers, who sometimes interested in other issues. But for the most part, some of that stuff will, turn publishers off if it's not within their worldview.
I suppose it also depends as well whether it's a book in relation to somebody's personal experience or knowledge or, real life, or whether it's completely fictional as well. I would imagine that would make a big difference in whether publishers are interested as well. Because if it's a complete fictional story, that's going to have, that there's less that can go wrong, isn't there, really? But when it's something that's from somebody's personal experience or something that's actually happened, you then get into the whole minefield of being factually correct and having all your ducks in a row. So because if somebody knows it's from, if somebody knows it's factual, people will fact check. So it has to stand up to that scrutiny as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and just in regard to this first part, just as a professional courtesy to everyone else, so that people can just take in information and not feel like this is just about pitching their work. If people want after this event, they can always query me, via our website. There's a submissions form there. I think it's tridentmediagroup.com/submissions. So just save all the pitches for that if you want. Or maybe another time we could do one of these where we just workshop hooks and query
That's,
letters. I'm happy to do that, but I
that
think
would be fantastic.
so we can get to other people's questions and, you know,
Agreed, agreed. I think that would be a fantastic idea because it is it's tough, isn't it? People do stress over their query letter, especially trying to sell their own work. So we will arrange a special Witty Writers Show all about your hooks and blurbs and what would make a great impact first sentence. All right. So I will save all these for that show. We've got a fantastic question from Priscilla. Welcome, Priscilla. She says, "Who buys the most books? What are the demographics?" Ooh,
oh gosh,
that's a big question.
yeah, that's so hard to just put your finger on. But basically, first of all, most people who read are women, uh, vast majority, and it's you know the same. The people who work in the publishing industry also mostly women. Um, from there, it's hard to say what the any one particular audience is, but if you kind of use that as a general rule of thumb, ideally you're in better shape if your protagonist is female or your book in some way will largely appeal to women. I always say that's a really big thing. Um, it's sort of like why, like in the theater world, it really appeals to the LGBTQ, T community because there are so many people like that operating in that world, interested in that world, and so no wonder a lot of the plays on Broadway deal with LGBTQ issues. So yeah, I would say the biggest demographic is women.
And what about genres? Which genre markets would you say are the biggest right now?
Oh, after that, fiction tends to be much bigger than nonfiction on the whole.
Mhm.
Um, you know, um, Usually general fiction, thrillers, mystery crime novels, and women's fiction or romance sometimes. Sometimes those terms get mixed up. They're not exactly interchangeable, but those are the really big ones.
Mm.
There are some big genres in kids' books and graphic novels, but in the world of fiction, those are the big ones. Science fiction and fantasy has always kind of struggled to have an audience. It's like with that genre, it's kind of like one big book or series emerges out of like a sea of other kinds of books. And it's been very, very hard over the years just because among publishers, there's really only one imprint at each publishing house that buys science fiction and fantasy. So it's kind of like threading a needle, whereas a book that can work on a lot of different levels, like it's a thriller, but it's also women's fiction, but it also has mystery crime elements to it. Like you could submit a book like that to different editors,
Mm.
different imprints at publishing houses.
Get more options. Priscilla, Priscilla says, "Who buys the most fiction
Oh
books?"
right, oh right, we looked at that, right?
So you
Um,
think it's definitely more
Fiction
women?
books. Yeah,
Mm,
similar answer. Yeah,
yeah.
similar question, similar answer. um, yeah, again, mostly women. Um, it's hard to say the age range or what. I mean, for a very long time, the baby boomer audience was a very big audience. You know, um, I think a lot of these books that sell phenomenally well are, books that end up in book clubs or Oprah's hands, like, her kind of audience from her book club. Um, Churchgoers, if the church says this is the book we're all going to be reading, especially if they're a mega church or something like that. That helps a lot. But yeah, I just on the whole, women are the main
And
readers.
women talk. Women are more likely to recommend stuff to their friends than men.
Yeah, I think men
True.
men actually read a lot more nonfiction, oddly
Yeah.
enough. It's kind of like in a man's mind, you would almost think it was like they were thinking, what's the solution to this problem I have? This book is going to help me figure out how to do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
Whereas women are more tend to be interested in personal growth, going on a journey which a story takes them on, and that by the end of it, they feel like they've come to know these characters and grow with them. Now, of course, there are exceptions to the rule each way, but on the whole, that's what we see in people's buying habits.
It's amazing, isn't it? A lot of the men that I know in my family and friend group, they read a lot of biographies and memoirs of people they admire. And you're right, self-improvements, books about the business that they're in, how to be more successful, etc., etc. Me, I just love fantasy. I love being taken away to a completely different world and a bit of escapism.
Hmm.
We've also got a very good question from Vikram. He says, "Hey, Mark, we really appreciate your time. Trident has a lot of highly qualified literary agents. If an author gets rejected by one agent within the group, is it worth querying another one right away?" Now, that's a very good question because I do get asked that a lot.
I think the submission policy is listed on our website, and people should just always read the submission policy anyway when submitting to a site. Too often, people just fill out a form, click agree to terms and conditions, and then submit it. But yeah, read the fine print. It says, I think it's something like 30 days. If you hear from us within that time, we're interested. If you don't, it usually equates with a pass. But at that point, yeah, after that point, you can query other people at Trident. Before then, the website will automatically block any query that comes in. If you're trying to submit multiples of a submission to agents across the agency, it just saves us a lot of time and effort.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily preclude you from working with another agent at the agency, but I will say usually if I can see promise in someone's work, even if it's not for me, I'll usually recommend it to a colleague. So sometimes it's better to just go with that, but you can always query again after that 30-day period.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, sometimes, if an author's been querying and they're not getting any interest, sometimes it's worth reevaluating your query letter and find that a new hook, a better description of your story, because you might not be selling it, you might
Yeah,
not be doing it justice.
I really agree with that sentiment. I think the most important thing people can get from that is if you experience any level of rejection or you just feel that way for some reason, it's not that people are saying you're not good. You should not feel, oh, I'm not good. You should feel, I'm not good enough. At least not yet. What do I have to do to be good enough? That's the right sentiment to take with that.
Yeah. And also, and this is something we've touched on before, as an author who's querying, I don't know what books you've just signed. I don't know what books you've just got coming out that's going to be released. And you might have something that's a bit too similar to what I'm pitching you at that time.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you're not able to take it, what I'm offering you, because you're going to have to put all your time, effort, and energy
There's
into new
a
release.
multitude of reasons why. I mean, there was an editor I once submitted a book to. She had some kind of trauma in her life that the book was reminding her of, and she simply couldn't read it for that reason. She had some kind of personal trauma, and you can't argue with that. So
Yeah. So it's
that's why it's a subjective business. Yeah.
Yeah, and don't give up. At the end of the day, try. If it doesn't work out, reassess what you're doing, change it up, and then give yourself a bit of time and then try again. Because you never know. There are plenty of authors, very famous, well-known authors, that were rejected numerous times for numerous works, and then all of a sudden they found the right agent, the right publishing company, and then not only was their book published, but their backlist was reintroduced as well. So you just never know. You just never know. I think we might get a couple more questions in before we run out of time. So let's have a look. Okay, Travis has got a good one. Hello, Travis. He said, thanks again for answering these, Mark. I also wanted to ask about word counts. I know it may seem a little nitpicky, but I read an interview you gave to Writers Digest a while back saying that literary fiction pieces should be in the range of 80 to 90k words, plus or minus 5k. Given there are a handful of classics in the given genre in the 50 to 60 word range, like Gatsby or The Sun Also Rises, how much weight should an author trying to sell a 70k word book, for instance, put on the question of word count?
Well, cars were also made a long time ago without seatbelts and airbags. Should cars be made now without seatbelts and airbags? Like, I think just because books were written one way 100 years ago, it was popular to have a 50, 60,000 word book. Doesn't mean it necessarily works well for today or really makes sense for today. But generally speaking, yeah, for fiction, 80 to 120,000 words is normal word count range. For nonfiction, it's the same. I tend to find the sweet spot is really that 80 to 90,000 words. It's just for the publisher's pricing on the book and everything, it makes it a crisp enough read and also helps the pricing of the book from a publisher's cost standpoint. But even with that said, you can go 5,000-10,000 words outside of that and still be fine. And, rules are meant to be bent and in some cases broken, especially I think when it comes to literary fiction. A lot of people like to take so many liberties. But what happens is with very short books, like 50,000 word books, novellas, basically, the publisher's margin for profit is so small that they can't make their numbers work, and it becomes the opposite problem if the book's too long. The book's too expensive then, both for the customer and the publisher to produce, not to mention translate, make into an audiobook. It presents challenges.
There are so many factors, aren't there? And that's the thing, we see it from our writing point of view, but you're seeing everything from a business point of view.
Yeah, it's like on songs that wanted to get radio play. They would always encourage them to be like a minute and a half or whatever it was, 2.5 minutes. Led Zeppelin faced a lot of challenges early on because they refused. They wanted, Stairway to Heaven to be like a 12-minute song or whatever it is. And
yeah, Queen and Bohemian Rhapsody was another one.
Of course, there are always going to be, artists, books, songs, whatever, that break the rules. But generally speaking, you'll have a lot less resistance on the road. It'll be a lot less bumpy, if you adhere to this stuff.
Yeah. And once you're a well-known author, you have a bit more sway. You can get away with being out of the box, can't you? Unfortunately, we have run out of time, Mark. You've been so fantastic answering everybody's questions. For those of you who have asked a question that we haven't got to, don't worry, because I am trying to keep tabs. Hopefully we'll be able to do another Q&A fairly soon so we can get some more questions in, because we've had some really, really good questions. They've been amazing. We will try and set up a special Witty Writers Show specifically to do with pitches and hooks and having the right first sentence to grab an agent's attention. So we will arrange that and keep you posted. In the meantime, please like and subscribe and click on the notification button. That way you will get notified of our upcoming events and shows. Mark, thank you so much.
Thank you
for being with us today. I truly appreciate you. And I can't wait for us to do it again, because we always learn something new. It's fantastic.
Great. I had so much fun. I'm glad everyone feels good.
Well, thank you, darling. I will put, I think I've already got most of the links in the comments and up below the video. But I'll also put the submission link on there as well for you.
Oh, thank you.
But thank you so much, darling. I truly appreciate your time, as I'm sure everybody else does.
Always a pleasure.
And we will see you all next time on the Witty Writers Show.
Take
Bye for
care.
now.
Bye-bye.